I'm not comfortable and I don't want to be comfortable and I don't want you to be comfortable and I don't want anybody watching this to be comfortable because this is a very, very uncomfortable thing to live through, to talk about, to experience. Like we should be uncomfortable.
Thank you, Sam, for joining us. I really appreciate your time today. Um, the purpose of these, I know you understand because we kind of talked prior, but for everyone listening, the purpose of these is deterrence through truth. And so basically, we want to talk about the warriors that we've lost and talk about the memories that were made with their families, but then also talk about the uncomfortable parts, and that's the what life is left behind after losing a warrior to this epidemic. And we really thank you for your courage for being here today and willing to talk about that.
I appreciate you.
So, all right. So just to start, can you start just by giving a brief introduction of who you are and then the warrior that you're going to be honoring today?
Absolutely. So my name's Samantha Bassett. I'm stand in honor of my husband, Mitchell Allen Bassett Jr. He was 0311 Infantry Rifleman, U.S. Marine Corps from '07 to 2014 when he got medically retired. And
Okay.
then from there forward, I met him in 2016. We got married in 2018. We were together for up until about 2 days after our 6 year wedding anniversary before he took his own life after dealing with the traumas of failure of reintegration and the PTSD and moral injury that he was left subject to.
Oh, that was we're always it's difficult to hear what happens after that separation and but I think the more we talk about it, maybe we can influence others that are going through the same thing that it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to bring it to somebody's attention. And I think there's a, what do you want to call it? There's this aura around suicide where people think that because you've lost a warrior to suicide, they can't come up and ask you about it, or oh, she's already lost somebody to this, she's not going to want to talk about it. So when we say stuff like that, what's your response to that?
To me, and sometimes I don't want to talk about it. I mean, it really depends on the place and the setting. Like if you're coming up to me while I'm working and wanting to talk to me about it, chances are like I can't put myself in that mind frame at that moment because obviously I'm trying to conduct business at that point, but outside of that, I very publicly talk about my situation, and that's part of I feel like the problem when it comes down to it is that people don't want to talk about it. And that's why we don't even know that we're in the middle of an epidemic. And most people don't because it's considered such a shameful thing. And I understand that we're trying to protect character here because I absolutely tried to keep it hidden from everybody. I didn't want anybody to know. I think I made it almost 48 hours before people started to find out that Mitchell was dead. And then I didn't want people to know how or why. It was a terrifying thing because you think that you're going to be subject to the, well, what did you do wrong or what didn't you do. And so I can understand where people don't want to be that way, but if somebody is willing to talk about it and they publicly spoke about it, or somebody like me that like my entire TikTok platform for the most part is around that, and I'm kind of rebridging how I go about that one in particular, but at the same sense, like it's obvious that I don't mind talking to people about it. So I guess you really just have to make that judgment call based on the person because I know of widowers that don't ever want to talk about it again. So
Right.
it really just depends on the person. I don't think I can speak for anybody but myself
All
in that
right.
situation.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, and we appreciate your openness to talk about it. The purpose of this platform is to hopefully someone in a similar situation to yours, or somebody that's having dark thoughts or in those dark places. Hopefully, they watch these, and maybe it creates a sense of deterrence that they hear about what life's like after this happens, and maybe it changes their mind. So thank you for your courage today. So I guess we want to learn a little bit about Mitchell, those for that didn't know him. So what was he like, and how would you describe his personality and his character to us that never got to meet him?
Actually, yeah. Easy, easy peasy. But Mitchell, he was like a big old teddy bear. Like he was always the biggest guy in the room. So you imagine the big burly guy. He was almost 6'5", like 280 pounds, pure muscle, all tattoos. I mean, terrifying looking to most people. And he did a lot of bouncing and security. He was good in that position. But anybody that knew him would tell you that he was like a big teddy bear. Like he genuinely loved everybody around him. He was that person that had to say hello and goodbye to every single person in the room, which drove me crazy because I'm a professional Irish goodbye. But he was always that one that was going to, anytime you needed him for anything, you just called him. He would go out for his friends and do things. He was always over at his friends helping renovate. He owned his own construction business. To all that, Mitchell was very loud. He was very boisterous. He could be a bit cocky, but he was a Marine, so he was confident. You know, he was very comfortable with people around him, and he always showed up. You know, no matter what, Mitchell was always going to be there for you. And that's one thing that people will tell you a lot about him, other than like his laugh. His laugh could fill any room. I remember when we first started dating, I could not stand his laugh. And that's because it was just like so obnoxious and in your face. But like as we got together and like things progressed and moved on, it was like an echolocator for me. Like that's how I found Mitchell, was listening for
Right.
that laugh. I always knew that he was there or close by because he did not laugh anywhere and not be heard.
That's that's awesome to hear. And so talking about he was always there, like he was always there for his friends. After he passed, was there like a moment where the people close to him felt like that they weren't able to be there for him as far like is just that essence of how he was and always consistently there for people?
And flip script, yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of people that wish they could have done more for Mitchell or would have known more, that he would have opened up to them. I know there was a story that I was told of where weeks before Mitchell had committed suicide, there was a time that one of his friends had called him and he was locked and loaded, ready to go. And Mitchell jumped in his truck and he drove over there and he sat with him, you know, and obviously I won't say who or why or
Right.
where, you know what I mean? But like the fact that now knowing or then knowing that Mitchell was also struggling so hard with that and he still took the time to go try to tell somebody else, hey man, you're worth it, when like he can't even find the ability to tell himself he's worth it. Like Mitchell was struggling for a while. Like this wasn't something that I didn't see coming. You know, like unfortunately it was not an if it was going to happen, it was a when it was going to happen situation. We had already had a prior attempt on our hands between the time that he even went to go help that person, you know, and it was a massive struggle for about 8 months with his mental health and dealing with my mental health because of it. And I had just gone through a full hysterectomy. So I mean, I've always been pretty chill, but even for a pretty chill person, like that's a pretty traumatic thing for a woman to go through at a young age, and especially going through like that shock menopause. Like it it made me to where I was a little untilted. And while I was even still walking eggshells around him and trying to cater to him because of his state of mind at that time, like I can't ever say that I did everything correctly. You know, I was also a variable in the situation and I played my cards just as well as he did. It just ended the way that it did. You know, I don't ever try to play the victim of this. I don't ever try to be like, well, I did everything that I could, or it was going to happen regardless. And I don't like it when people tell me, well, there's nothing you could have done. You know what I mean? Like it was going to if what was going to happen was going to happen, it was his choice. And I understand that. I do, but you can't convince me that somebody is past hope. You know what I mean?
Right.
Until they take that last breath, I just don't believe that people are past hope.
Right. Well, and then oftentimes people talk about the mental health struggles of the warrior, of the veterans, of the first responders. But you brought up a good point. You yourself were struggling with mental health issues as well for medical procedures and stuff like that. And people don't talk about that enough. We don't concentrate on the families enough. Of the families are the backbone. And so you were making sure the house was in order and making sure he had a construction business. So as he was working, you were making sure that you held things at home. And I don't think people understand the effort that takes to
Right.
to
But I mean, I also worked 5 jobs too, so I was running back and forth. Like we were always constantly on the go, and we don't talk about that enough. There's not enough support when it comes to like secondary PTSD and things of that sort. Um, for the family and the spouses, like I've never had anybody reach out to me, especially as somebody that met just a veteran, not even him being active, but I don't know of any active people that have or active spouses that have been with their spouses while they were active transitioning into the veteran side where anybody bothered to reach out to them and offer them support and offer them therapy for how to deal with it, because it is a thing. And when they're going through things of that, like we are the first responders, your wife, your children, your family, we're going to be the ones that see it first. We're going to be the ones that can help tilt or like bring you back up. We need to be educated in how to deal with the things that these people are going through because it's obviously not just one person that's dealing with it. This is a pattern across the board, but we're
right,
not we're not doing anything about it. And then when there's veterans out there that try to blame their PTSD for abuse of that sort. And there's so many spouses that you talk to that have gotten out of relationships with veterans or active service members, and they get chastised essentially because they couldn't deal with it, or they just walked away, or they're terrible people, or they get scarlet lettered, but they don't understand sometimes like what those mental health issues come with and how those people end up treating you. Mitchell was extremely vile in the last 8 months of his life. And he could be more so towards me than anybody else because I was closest to him. He felt more comfortable with me, and generally that's how it works out. These people love me, so I can be ugly to them because they're going to continue to love me at the end of the day, and while sometimes that's true, it's still extremely hurtful and it plays with your mental health. You can't help but try to figure out like, what am I doing wrong? What have I done to him to set him off, and at the end, and then you ask them, you're like, why are you so upset with me? And it's I'm not upset with you. I'm struggling right now. And I'm like, okay, well, you can laugh and joke with your buddies at the bar, but the moment you get home, you're angry, you're pissed off, you don't want to talk to anybody, you just want me to leave you alone. God forbid I ask you more than one question in a 5 minute period, you're gonna fucking lose your shit. Like what are
right.
we doing? What are we doing here? And he'd be like, well, it's just because I feel comfortable with you. Like, I don't feel the need to fake being happy or fake putting on a smile. But that plays on you too as a spouse.
Right.
You just you don't know how to handle that. And then when they get in those moods and they're overly sad, one thing that I really despise hearing veterans and actives say a lot, because now that I am in the community and like talking to people, is my wife is my lifeline, as far as like she's the only reason I live. And they'll be like, I've told her that she's the only reason I'm here. She's the only reason I'm alive. Like, you can't do that to people. You cannot put that burden on people, because
Right.
I understand where it comes from is a good place. I understand that you mean it out of love, but I assure you, when Mitchell said those things to me, and I know when I've heard it in the back end to other people, but even still, like, even like in a sad note, an angry note, doesn't matter. Like, you're putting a burden on somebody. Now all of a sudden I'm walking on eggshells. I can't feel how I need to feel. I can't even talk to you about it because I'm so scared of tilting you. Like, I'm so scared that anything I'm going to do is push you over the edge. And then when things get rocky with us, now all of a sudden, like, you're threatening to end your life because I'm all you're living for. You have to live for something more than me because that's just too much. And then it creates this sense of moral injury in myself because I was told that so many times. And guess what? My husband's dead. Like, so what didn't I do to save him? Because
Right.
apparently I was the only reason he was here.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, and I've never processed it on that side, but I'm glad to hear someone else say that because it brings that point to life. So we're talking about, the families. There's a interesting statistic out here that once a family like widow loses a spouse to suicide, they're 3 times more likely to die by the same fate. So with that statistic being against you, what have you done to recognize Mitchell or bring some kind of hope into your life so you don't become that next statistic as far as following the same fate as Mitchell?
And it's tough. And I will say that I was probably honestly closer to that path before he died because of the way that everything was going, because of how hard he was struggling, because I could see his death barreling at me. And I didn't think that I could live this life without him. I was so close to just being done. I did not want to see him go. I didn't think I could live through it. So, like, I was much more in a bad state of mind then. And then afterwards, now, like, to this day, I grew up in Alabama. I grew up learning how to shoot. I know 100% how to handle a gun, and I've always carried. I'm a bartender. I almost 9 times out of 10 carry. I have one in my car, or I have one on me, or something of that sort. I haven't carried a gun since Mitchell died. I won't do it because every time I pick one up, I have intrusive thoughts, and so I leave it locked up in my safe. Like, yes, could I get to it if I wanted to, but I'd have to, like, it's not going to be a split second decision. It wouldn't be rash. You know what I mean? It would be something that I had to thoroughly think through. And that's sometimes the disconnect that you need is having to put in that code, having to go through the effort of moving things to get to it. You know what I mean? Like, just that alone could bring you back to the reality of, like, what the fuck am I doing? Hold on, stop.
Right.
But outside of that, it's been a struggle to find the will to live, especially not having children. you know um I know, and I could not imagine for the people that do have children that have to continue on and not only deal with their own grief, but have to watch as their children grieve. I couldn't imagine that pain. You never want to see your children in pain, so I could imagine that comes with its own struggles. But for somebody that doesn't have that, it almost removes any ability to have a will to live, to want to do anything, because there's nobody relying on me. I have nothing left in this world. I have nobody to let down at this point other than, like, friends and family, outside of, like, when you're an adult you consider your immediate family your family. You know what I mean? Like, yes, absolutely, you would care that your parents would be upset, or your nieces or nephews or whatever, but it's not the same feeling as, like, a child, to
Right.
you in that moment, because your little world, your household revolves in that circle. And when you remove everybody but yourself from that household, it's a difficult process to go through. And I think that's kind of why I also choose to live with other people. They help keep me accountable and keep me from being too alone.
Right.
But to anybody else struggling with it, it's all about order. Chaos feeds anxiety. So, as Merv always says, get up in the morning and make your bed.
Yep.
Go brush your teeth, make your bed. Your peace starts with order. That's where you find peace. And then outside of that, I've just tried to embrace life. I've done a lot of traveling here lately. I try to do it cheaply because I'm not made of money. And unfortunately, Mitchell did not have life insurance. So that was definitely been left in enough debt to strap me down for the next 10 years. But I have found ways to get around that. I have a lot of friends in a lot of places, so that helps out to be able to get out and just kind of enjoy the moments. Like,
Right.
you can wait your entire life to feel better or be happy, to start experiencing it. But what happens on the in between is the actual life part. Like, you could wait the rest of your life to be happy and never get there. And sometimes it's that experience that helps you heal versus the healing before you experience something.
That makes sense. And hearing that first, I call it like the first line perspective, like a direct perspective of someone who's living with it. And so I guess we're talking about what helped you cope and what was life like immediate. Yeah, I know we've talked about how you yourself were more mentally unstable before he passed, but after he passed, what was life immediately like? What was that new reality for you that you had to adjust to, and how did that change the person that you are today?
Immediately after, I sat on my couch for a month and didn't move. Outside of making plans for the funeral and being everything that I deal with things on a logical sense. So I was more focused in on the hows, the whens, the wheres, the logistics of the situation. Um, Immediately after, I was in denial about a lot of it. And what I at the foreground went for was the triggers. What were the stressors here? What were all of the stressors here? And as I started to dig, I'm finding one little fire after another little fire after another little fire, and they just go all the way across the board. And a part of my denial was thinking that if I could just put out all the fires, like if I can put out every one of these fires, I might get Mitchell back. And so I went into that mode for a minute. And then it was a severe depression, a severe chronic, did not want to go anywhere, didn't want to talk to anybody. I'm sorry.
No, no, the raw emotions are, please express those, and no one's going to judge you for those emotions, because that's part of your story, is that's part of the struggle, is the emotional pain that you've had to deal with and fight through.
Right. Well, I mean, off the forego, I felt punished. I felt very punished by Mitchell and my life, but mostly because I couldn't save him. And I felt like because there was so much vile there towards the end, that like he really was throwing it in my face. I felt like he was. But there was also the fact that he called me right before he did it, and the last words he ever said to me were, "I love you." And it was genuine and it was sincere. And so for the first like week or two, I was very angry and I did feel very punished and I felt very guilty. And then I started to find some weird type of piece of thinking that maybe he genuinely thought he was ridding the world of his burden. Like somewhere in the back of his mind, he absolutely thought I was going to be better off without him. And I'm not at all. Um, I'm highly damaged at this point. But he really did think that. And you want to find truth in one side or the other. You want to say it was this or it was that. It was like he was trying to be genuine and he did think that he was doing me a favor, or he was being conniving and he was being manipulative and he was throwing it in my face. You want to say it was one way or another, but the world's just not black and white. Like there's so much gray area, and the truth of the matter is both of those realities existed. You know, and some of it was spite, some of it was ego, some of it was fear, some of it was anger, just straight guilt. And I think the hardest thing that I dealt with, because of the fact that I saw it coming, because it wasn't like a so out of the blue situation for me, was the amount of guilt that I felt in the very beginning because of how I felt when I found him. You know what I mean? Because my body went into shock, because I stood there for I don't know how long. I can't tell you. Um, I know when I called the cops, I was extremely calm until I couldn't find my dog, and that's what kind of set me awry. And I think it's just because like logically, I knew that he was gone. I knew that ripping a gun from his hand wasn't going to fix the situation. Bothering the scene wasn't going to fix the situation. Like trying to go through his phone wasn't going to bring him back. So like in my rational mind, I couldn't understand why I would freak out in that moment. Like there was nothing I was going to do over emotionally that was going to change the situation that I was in. So there's two types of people in the world that respond to trauma in two different ways. And some of them get highly emotional and irrational. And some of them go into like what I imagine most veterans and military people understand, like a crisis mode. and they get very logical. They get very calm. They remove any amount of emotion from a situation. They disassociate from their emotional side 100%. And in that moment, they're just there to, what are the next orders? What do we do here? What's the next set of rules? Call 911. We get the ambulance. We go to the detective. We go to the funeral home. You know what I mean? Like, that's where my brain went, because I couldn't emotionally attach myself to the situation, but because I felt so tortured by his suffering, it created this sense of relief when I found him. When my body processed, my brain processed in that moment that he was dead, there was a sense of weight that was lifted off of me. And it wasn't because I was happy about it. And it wasn't because of anything other than the fact that I naturally, as somebody that loved him, was so tired of watching him suffer that I was, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was so happy that he had found some type of peace. And that was a natural response. And I immediately felt guilt for that. Immediately in that moment, I was just like, oh my God, I cannot even believe that that's how you felt. You know, like, the hardest part of finding Mitchell was not finding Mitchell. It was calling his mother. That that was the part that absolutely destroyed me, was hearing her response to the situation, being states away, and it literally shattered me. And then
Yeah.
from there, the only thing I really remember outside of getting out of my parents' car because they had showed up, um, my mom had called one of the priests at her church, and, or not priests, but preachers, because she's not Catholic. I was Catholic with my grandmother, but she had called one of the preachers over there to talk to me. You know what I mean? And I remember us getting ready to leave, and she said the preacher was pulling up, and he turned around. He did like a U-turn to follow us to the house. I just remember jumping out of the car and like going up to him and just like begging him. I was like, no, you please, you have to go back. Like, please, like, I just need you. I wanted to make sure that he prayed over him before he left. And that was really important to me. Even though now it's hard to believe in a God that would put me in this situation.
I can understand that, and you really, and people who would even criticize how you feel can't, if they've never been in the situation you are, having to deal with so many emotions and unknowns. You can't really say something insert yourself somewhere that you truly don't understand.
Right.
And
And I
yeah,
mean, I talk about that hard stuff because there are people out there that are going to feel the same thing, and it's human natural response. You know,
right.
just like a lot of what Mitchell was dealing with, a lot of what the veterans are dealing with when it comes to that PTSD, and especially the moral injury, it's a human natural response. And feeling that way does not make you a bad person. You know, I've talked to you before, and I talked to you about the moral injury, and a lot of the reason that Mitchell suffered from that, the reason that he felt bad was not because he did what he had to do, but it was because he enjoyed doing it. And where that stemmed from was such a natural response, such a fight or flight response, that any person, psychological level, is supposed to almost feel that way. It's how we're wired, you know? So, like, if we don't talk about that because we're scared that somebody's going to judge us for it, then we always feel like we're just terrible people. And that's what builds on that guilt of moral conscience. And we can't get it off our chest because we don't want to talk about us being bad people. Everybody's afraid that somebody's going to see them in a bad light. And that's why I talk about things, even if they make me look bad, even if it's like, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Well, maybe I shouldn't have. I don't know. I'm doing this for the first time ever. This is the first time I've ever lived my life. first time I've ever dealt with losing my husband. Like this is the first time I've ever had to go through this experience, just like a lot of other people. And we're going to make mistakes, but accountability and being able to own up to that is how we're going to make it through, not by shoveling it off and giving excuses of, well, this happened and that happened and this happened. Like sometimes we don't have justification. Sometimes the excuse just isn't there. Sometimes shit happens. Sometimes we fuck up. And we just got to be able to own that and grow from it because you can't change it.
Yeah. I like the accountability piece because one of the things Heroes in the Sky focuses on is uncomfortable accountability. And that's one of the problems we have with certain disciplines, trying to get them to accept that they have a problem with this epidemic. Is their chain these chain of commands, the leadership, they're not going to come forward and say we have a problem with suicide, because then it means that one, they're admitting weakness because they're admitting some kind of failure because as a team they didn't do X or they didn't do Y. But then also it's if they come out and say there's a problem, then they have to face uncomfortable accountability to make it better. And a lot of the leaders we have today aren't willing to face uncomfortable accountability. And we're noticing that in a lot of these disciplines. And so
Right.
hearing you talk about it brings it home that this is a the uncomfortable accountability part is about as big as a problem as the epidemic itself.
Exactly. And that's why us as the people that are going through it have to be able to speak up because it's obvious that the people that represent us are not going to talk about it. But they can't ignore us in numbers. But we have to be willing to talk about it. We have to be willing to be able to take our own personal accountability to make other people like deal with their accountability there. And I heard that a lot, especially even still now when people ask me questions or want to do something with me, podcast, most especially, is the question of like, are you comfortable? Like, are you comfortable with this? We're going to do this if you're comfortable. And the answer to that question is always no. I'm not comfortable and I don't want to be comfortable and I don't want you to be comfortable and I don't want anybody watching this to be comfortable because this is a very, very uncomfortable thing to live through, to talk about, to experience. Like we should be uncomfortable. We don't fix things by not reaching out of our comfort zone. That's how we've got things as bad as they are now because everybody wants to stay in their little safety zone, and they're stuck in their own perceptions. And I made a video about this the other day about the difference between perception and perspective. And while everybody has their own perceptions in life and what's in front of them and how they're going through things, a lot of people throughout everyday culture lack perspective. They can't see past that perception. And so they're not willing to use empathy. They're not willing to listen to people. They're not willing to intake information on a level of understanding versus just a level of response. Everybody wants to hear to reply. They don't want to hear to listen to people because everybody wants to similarize their experiences and things of that sort. And I understand, but at the same sense, like you will never understand people around you. You'll never understand context in a genuine form until you can step back and stop trying to look at everything through your own viewpoint. You have to be able to realize that other people, they grow up differently, they deal with different things, they have different demographics, different challenges, and that goes for everything in general. And we don't take enough time to try to see every single point of view because not only do I try very hard to get my point of view out there, I also try to push out Mitchell's and anybody else's. I always try to break it down to however I'm trying to explain it to the person, they can understand it. And that's invaluable when you're trying to talk to people because if you're only going to explain your perception and not even try to adapt your situation to somebody else's perception, then you don't understand perspective
Right.
because everything is situational.
Yeah. And yeah, everyone has different scenarios. And yeah, that's a great point. And so we're talking about your struggles and life after. When you lost Mitchell, there's a constant little birdie in my ear as I talk to widows and I talk to mothers. and I ask them about the family relationship after losing one. What does the support look like? Did you have a lot of support from your family, from his family, people checking in on you like after his loss? Because some of the stories you hear are quite the opposite. And it ends up being, well, no, no one from my family checks on me. No one from my family reaches out to me. And so how was that for you? What did that look like for you? Like your family, his family, and then them checking up on you after his loss?
Right. And that makes me sincerely sad for a lot of people because a lot of people do get blamed in these types of situations. People are looking to put their anger and blame into somebody. Fortunately for me, my parents have stood their ground on being on my back. They're always going to have my back. All of my family has. Um, and then on top of that, Mitchell's family, most especially his parents, his brother, and his brother's wife, my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, they were my saving grace through this entire episode. I called him that night at 4 a.m. And I will honestly say that me and his family are closer now than we ever were the entire time that me and Mitchell were together. And a lot of that rooted from a jealousy on his end because his brother was able to stay in the military and his brother had everything that he wanted. So Mitchell didn't, he didn't like comparing himself to him. You know what I mean? It's his older, more successful brother. And Mitchell's eyes and Billy's eyes, it was, oh, Mitchell's got the freedom to do whatever he wants. You know what I mean? He can up and go and travel and do, it's always greener on the other side. But when it came down to it, Billy and Carrie helped me so much. They did almost everything with me. They did not let me go alone to like the viewing. They helped me set up the funeral and everything. I still to this day talk to them. It was his brother's birthday yesterday. So I made sure I messaged him for that. I'm going to be planning another trip to go out there. I go to our nieces and nephews like events and things of that sort. They're about 3 hours down the road from me, and then outside of that, I have a truly wonderful community. Me and Mitchell were both very well known commodities in this community. We're in a small town, and if you didn't know Mitchell through his like construction business, or you didn't know me through the family business that I grew up in, or our affiliations to the Legion or the VFW or the Riders, or the fact that I've been bartending all over the Tri County area for the last 10 years, like I know so many people, this entire community as a whole came together to help me, every single one of them. And I could not be more grateful. And that's another reason that I go out of my way to help people because I don't know how it could have been as a woman with children that never gets out, that doesn't know her community, doesn't have her family nearby, or something of that sort. Like, I would have drowned. I don't know how I would have made it through. I wouldn't have known what a VSO was to this day. I wouldn't have known how to go through DIC or that I could even do that. The detective that showed up on scene was a friend of mine. Like before he asked me anything, he hugged me. Like, not because I was upset, but because he knew me, because he was also upset. There was a lot that he didn't ask me that was in that report that was true because we were known, because people knew, you know what I mean, that Mitchell suffered from PTSD. People knew that he was a veteran. People knew he was in the Marine Corps. People knew that he had had a prior attempt. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that thing, those parts were common knowledge because of our place in the community. When Mitchell didn't show up to the golf course for 3 days after his first attempt, he had doctors at the golf course calling around hospitals trying to find him. You know what I mean? And then calling me and trying to find him. Like there was so much support here, honestly, before and after. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that Mitchell couldn't come to terms with who he was as a person. Mitchell thought he was ridding this world of a burden. He didn't think that he was alone or that nobody loved him. You know what I mean? He didn't love himself. He hated who he was. That's what it boiled down to, not any lack of love of family or friends.
Right. I think that goes back to the moral injury you talked about. Is he saw himself enjoying what he did in the combat theater of operations and the the task that you have to do over there. But and he enjoyed doing that stuff. And then I always call it I call it just a lack of purpose because the one thing I say being a combat veteran is the one thing that kept me alive in Iraq and all that was adrenaline. And the one thing you cannot reproduce when you take that uniform off, and because I was medically retired as well, you come home and there's nothing here in the States that can produce the adrenaline that overseas combat gave me. Nothing.
Right.
And I don't know, Mitchell could have been dealing with some of that as well, where a lot of us veterans, that's the one thing we thrive on is that adrenaline rush. That you said it perfectly earlier. You said the where we disassociate emotionally and we only focus on the task at hand because we have to focus on the task at hand to come back alive or to accomplish the mission in a overseas combat theater. So I'm really glad you brought up the moral injury because you don't hear a lot of people talk about moral injury. And then when you do hear it, it kind of resonates with me and probably with any veteran who's had to do extensive combat tours or anything overseas. They probably have some kind of feeling of that emulates that.
Right. And it's always the scenario that I break it down when I'm talking to what I would call a true civilian, somebody that has no military ties, that doesn't understand being around the environment or the culture at all. And the way that I always describe it to them is if you were to take my mother and you stand her right next to me, and then you were to kill her in front of me, I would destroy you. And I would love every second of it. And most people would. You know what I mean? Most people, if you hurt somebody that you genuinely care about right in front of them, they want to avenge that person, right? I'm going to want to avenge my mother in that situation. Now you take the scope of you're putting these people through boot camp. You're telling them they don't matter anymore. They are a US government. The only thing that matters is the people around them and getting back to the States alive. Then you create them a environment and a culture that's called a brotherhood. And it's done on purpose because you want to protect people that are family. So they want you to be close. So they want you to treat everybody that's around you like your brothers and your sisters. Because when you go over there and you're watching those people be eliminated right in front of you, you want to avenge them. And yeah, avenging them is going to feel kind of good. It is. At that point, you can understand it. And then you come back over here and you can have all the pride in the world for everything that you did. And then somebody that doesn't understand anything, or the better way that I like to term it is they don't understand anything further than a first world problem. They don't understand that feeling. They don't understand how you could be proud of that. They don't understand what they consider like, oh, you're happy to go over there and murder people, like that's not the situation. That's not the environment that people are walking into. They're not kicking in doors and just taking out children, you know what I mean? Like these are war zones. And people don't understand that over here in America because they don't have to deal with it, and that in itself was very frustrating for Mitchell at times. Just knowing that. And now as a widowed person that does have that trauma of everything that I dealt with him and finding him and everything else, like I can understand it. Like I do get irritated when people talk about stupid shit. I just do. Like it's such small potatoes. Like in the grand scheme of everything that I've been dealing with, there are so many small first world problems out there. And it just drives me absolutely insane. But for Mitchell, part of that was the fact that it created a hero's complex, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. A lot of people hear the term hero's complex and they associate it to manipulation or narcissism and things of that sort. And while yes, absolutely, Mitchell did have a tiny smidge of a narcissistic side, especially when he drank, he was still a pretty decent person. But the military creates that in almost everybody intentionally. And it's that creating of purpose by physically protecting other people. They're creating this sense of like you're going out and doing these extremely adrenaline high activities because you're doing something honorable, because you're a hero, because this needs to be done so that these other people can be protected. It creates this sense of I'm doing something on a small scale. Like one little thing on a small scale is creating a ripple effect on a very, very big scale. Then you take those same combat veterans, you pull them back over here in the US, and you got them delivering pizzas and packing boxes of Dominoes, and they're like, what the fuck is the point of life? Like, none of this is helping anybody. And as Mitchell would say, like, yeah, somebody gets their package, it's one person, but like, it's not saving governments, it's not saving children, it's not fixing the world issues, it's not global war on terrorism. You know what I mean? Like, it creates that heroes complex, and then it rips it away from you, and it establishes this loss of purpose, loss of drive and mission. And then everybody's waiting on the permission again. They're like, okay, well, where's my permission to live? That's what I see in so many veterans. What's the goal next? What's the mission next? You don't need it. You don't need permission to live anymore. And then when you associate moving on, there was a point in time that Mitchell could never remove the military as a separate aspect in life. He always wanted the after part of military to be the next chapter in his book, when he never realized that he had to put that book back on the shelf. This was a whole nother book in a same series. This was not a chapter in a book. Nothing you do, nothing he ever did, nothing any veteran does is ever going to be that military again. Not the culture, not the brotherhood, not the work, not the ethic. None of it is going to be the same. You will be what in terms of is a civilian, and it's a different culture. It really is. But you have to learn that you have to separate them. They're not going to be the same lifestyle. You have to come at peace with that. And Mitchell couldn't. He kept trying to compare his life then to his life now. He couldn't just find happiness and peace in life now.
That's deep, but as a veteran, me thinking about that's, I mean, it's hard to argue against anything when you hear perspectives like this, because a lot of us don't think about it, and the reason we haven't thought about it is because we have not been put in that tragic position where we had to deal with it. And I think that's where these conversations are very valuable, because no one wanted, we know you didn't want to end up in this situation, but now you're in this situation and you're doing the best you can to raise awareness and talk to people. And we really appreciate you for that, because as a veteran myself, I say thank you, because some of the things you're talking about hit home with me and make me feel a little different about my identity or my purpose, and maybe give me a little bit more hope. And I'm hoping that any veteran that listens to this has the same feeling.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's
Yeah.
part of what keeps me going, especially when, like, the biggest thing that I have the disagreement on is the PTSD moral injury. You know what I mean? Is the fact that Mitchell's contributing factor was PTSD. And I believe 100% that it was the moral injury that ended up taking Mitchell out.
Right.
It was the disdain for himself at the end of the day because of the situation and how he felt about everything. And I talk about that quite a bit. And there's been so many veterans and just people in general that tell me it's the first time they've ever heard of it. They had no idea what it was. And they all just associate it to PTSD. And so, like, it makes me glad to know, because the first part of being able to deal with what you're dealing with is understanding it, right? Is being able to comprehend what you're going through. Like, how do you tackle something if you don't even know what you're dealing with? You
Right.
can't just go blindly in trying to hit a pinata, like, you're essentially, now you're at a kid's birthday party, just swinging in the dark, hoping you get it, like, and now you're wasting your time, your energy. And when you try fixing things over and over again without identifying the problem, and you're going at things, you end up exhausting yourself because you're putting towards effort to fix something, but it's not how you fix it. So now you're sitting back and you're going, hey, like, I've tried everything there is to fix this and nothing works. So I want to give up. I'm hopeless at this point, but you haven't even truly identified what the problem is. So you're going about it all wrong. It's not that you can't be helped. It's the fact that you're not taking enough time to figure out what type of help you really need. instead of just aimlessly swinging in the dark and hoping something sticks. And that's where
Yeah.
that accountability flies in. That's where we have to sit down and be willing to realize, like, what is my bullshit?
Right.
What am I lacking on? What am I doing that I potentially could be doing better? What can we work on? Mine is talking over people, cutting people off. I try really hard not to do that, but it's one of my own personal icks. Another one is repeating people when I think they're funny. It sounds like I'm mocking them, and I'm not. I'm genuinely not. But it's about taking a step back as my person, and instead of going, well, I genuinely thought that I was just trying to repeat you because you're funny, and this is how I viewpoint it, and that's how you should accept it. No, take a step back. That person may have thought you were mocking them. It made them feel bad. You wouldn't like that. Don't do that to them. Be willing to fix your own icks instead of trying to think that because you can explain them, that it excuses them. Because explaining why you're a rude person does not excuse you
Hmm.
to be a rude person.
Correct. Yeah, and I really like that point of view because I mean, it's true. Um, as we're talking just about this overall situation, and I think you've hit on this a good bit, but I want to go a little bit more direct, is, dealing with the tragic loss that you've dealt with in the time that's passed. What do you wish people understood more about grief after losing someone to this? What are we missing? Like, what are the thoughts that people have when they really don't understand what's going on? But from your point of view, who's dealt with it and lived through it, what are we missing? What can we do better?
Um, a lot of it is just based on the person. Again, like I said, everybody's individualized. The biggest thing is the one size fits all. It's the same way that, like, y'all don't like being treated in a sense of like, I don't want to go to the VA because not they're always just trying to give me pills. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody's going to grieve the same way. Not everybody's going to cope the same way. The one thing that bothers me more than anything is when people tell me, "Well, he'll be waiting on you. You'll see him again another day." Like, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that, because as a grieving widow, what does that imply to me? That means that if I were to just die, I would see my husband. That's how those numbers go up that you're talking about that follow. You know what I mean? Because people are doing that, they're being insensitive to that fact. Um, but outside of that, people just have to understand that grief is waves. It's not a like AA process. There's not 12 steps. Absolutely, you do have certain steps of grief that you go through, but everybody thinks it's going to be in order. Like, you get past the acceptance, so now you're on to anger, which means that you should be on to sad, but you can go from acceptance to sad to denial, back to anger over here again, then random manic phases. Like, it's all waves. Not everything's going to affect you the same way every single day. Like, it truly is just like basing the situation about the person that you're with. Because some people are going to want to cry about it. Some people are going to want to sit in silence. Some people are going to want to talk about it. And as the person that's grieving, those people that you can get with. And I have several friends, and they've all helped me in different ways. I had three friends very specifically that I reached out to a lot during my time. And one of them would sit there and stare at you like a deer in headlights, wouldn't say a damn word to you. So if you didn't want a response, she was perfect. We had another one that you never going to talk, because she talked the entire time you were with her. So if you didn't feel like talking, but you need your mind to shut up, you needed to sit with somebody, she was the one to call. Then you had one that was right in the middle of both of them. She always had the right thing to say. She was never saying too much. She was never saying too little. She listened when she needed to, and it's all about finding the balance in that, and just being able to accept that some people want to be left alone. That's been the biggest thing for me. Um, is I'm a very private person when it comes to my emotions. Now, the situation I have no problem talking to people about, but I married a Marine. I was the daughter of an Army airborne. And if there's one thing that we were taught, it was don't be a bitch about it. Like we're subject to that same stigma as spouses and as children, um, of military, that we have to be a little bit harder exterior, and it's okay to show emotion, but I don't like overly showing emotion anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not
Right.
one of those people. Like, I don't mind crying if I have to cry, but I'm going to be trying to suck it up. Like, I'm going to be
Yeah.
like, calm down, like, swallow that knot. You're going to be okay. Like, it's just that posterior there for, hmm, how's the best way to put it? Essentially, just listen to the people. Just listen to them when they're telling you what they need. I've It was like with my mother. I love her to death. But there was a lot of times that I was like, I just need you to back off for a second. Just let me breathe. Like, I'm trying to find some type of peace here and you're suffocating me. Like, that seems to be a big thing, is everybody wants to be in your face constantly, especially, I don't know if it's everybody's experience or if it's just because, like, legitimately I've been bartending for a long time, that, like, it's my entire community. Like, within 3 days of Mitchell being dead, I had over 400 messages in my inbox, and I couldn't compute a single one of them. I was getting phone calls left and right. To this day, I get messages left and right, left and right, left and right, phone calls left and right, text messages left and right. And I feel bad, but the energy that I don't have to keep bringing this up and explaining it to people over and over and over again is just draining. And then it's not just me grieving. It's not me sitting here talking to you about it. Because when I'm talking to you, you don't know Mitchell. You're not grieving Mitchell. You can feel bad about it. You can hate that it happened. You know what I mean? You can wish that you met him. But there's people here that are actually grieving. And when they show up at my bar while I'm trying to work and they're crying, like, it makes it harder for me to do my job. Um,
Yeah.
I have so much support here that I'm moving to get away from it because it's suffocating. So a lot of times it's just about giving the distance while also offering the support, but not nagging. Jesus, just leave it to one message. I promise they'll respond if they need you.
Right. That can definitely see that because it's that's your or natural response to, oh, do they need something? Do they need something? But then I guess it makes sense when it comes to actually giving them what they need, you don't really see it. You don't, if they need the space, you continue to send the messages, and I could
Right.
definitely see that.
Since I have lost Mitchell, anytime that somebody close to me loses somebody, I will wait a day or two. First, I wait for people to do public notices. I don't ever message somebody if I hear say it or something of that sort, because they may not want people to know. That was a big thing for me. That was very hard. Like, I couldn't even, it wasn't even 4 a.m. I found Mitchell at like 2 a.m. By 4 a.m., I was getting text messages from random people because people knew us, because the EMTs knew us, because the police on scene knew us, because they're calling, and everybody means the best. You know what I mean? They just want to tell me they love me. They just want to, but it's every single time you do that, you're reminding me that my husband's dead. With every single condolence, there's a reminder that he's not there. And it floods in so fast. So when people around me lose somebody, I give them a day or two. I wait for a public outing of it, some type of social media, or for them to outright tell me, you know what I mean? However it goes out, that it's made public knowledge to either me or the public that the situation has occurred. From that point forward, I will send them one message and one message alone. And that's, if you need me, if there's anything at all that I can do for you, this is my phone number. Please do not hesitate to call me night or day. And I leave it right there. And typically in those situations, I've had about 3 or 4 of them since then. People will wait about a month to reach back out to me. And that's about how long I waited to start reaching back out to people, but the people that bombard me, I will go out of my way not to talk to. The people that send me messages back to back to back, like it drives me crazy. I cannot stand it. Like if you the best advice I can have for somebody that is dealing with somebody going through something like I've been through is offer your support, give them the way to contact you, and let them make that decision. Unless there's, I mean, obviously, you know your people better. Everything's situational. Maybe there's another girl out there that's going through it, or another husband that's out there going through it that does like the attention. Maybe you do have to like hit them up every 5 seconds. I don't know. But in my situation, that's what I've experienced and that's how I handle it. And when people finally do get back to me, they appreciate that. You know what I mean? They're like, I appreciate you not like pushing me to want to talk about it or asking me what happened. You know what I mean? Or that's another thing. Don't fucking ask people what happened. Like there's very, very little words of comfort in this situation. And there are no right ones. I promise you, there are no right words for somebody that has gone through what I have gone through. But there are a ton of wrong ones. And sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, if you need me, call me. I love you. If you want to
Yeah.
talk about it, we can talk about it. But don't tell people how long it's going to take them to grieve. Don't tell people that you can relate to their situation because you can't.
Mm-mm.
Natalie, me and her went through essentially one of the most, as close as our paths as paths get. We have similar situations. And I will still never, ever understand how she felt, what she went through, and vice versa. You
Right.
cannot understand somebody's specific situation, and comparing it to things will piss people off quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially someone directly dealing with the grief and yeah. So I want to end on a few things. One of the things I want to end about is we've heard about how you met Mitchell. We've heard about the grief and the history. But if you had one more moment to speak with him, what would you tell him today about who you
Right.
are and
Well, first, I'd probably hit him straight in his face because I'm still angry. First, I'd be really, really angry that he didn't think that one, I would care enough to want to put out every single fire with him, that he could genuinely cause me this much pain after I told him it would, after he knew. I think that would bug me the most. Um, that'd probably be the first thing I did. But outside of that, like I would just want to remind him that he is worth it, like everybody's worth it. And there was never anything broken about him. The monster he thought that he was, or the monster that he talked about being inside of him, never existed. And I wish he knew that.
that's touching and that's it's straight to the point as well. Okay, I think I can appreciate and everyone watching this will appreciate you being honest about your true feelings. And so the last thing I'm going to ask you, and we'll close this out, is so learning about Heroes in the Sky, and I know you saw the battle vest that we did with his name on it, and we're continuing to produce those battle vests. So as many battle vests as we can do, we're going to do those and push these warriors' legacies out. How does it make you feel when you see those vests or you see those memorial efforts? How does it make you feel like honoring his legacy, what the program's doing?
I
And
love what y'all do. And I love honoring those people. I feel like they should be recognized. I try really hard to skate that line of honor and glorifying a situation. I feel like there's a very, very fine line there, and y'all tread it very well. You do very good to honor those that have passed on, and I appreciate that because at the end of the day, Mitchell was an amazing person, and he did sacrifice for this country, and he did everything that he did out of the goodness of his heart, even taking himself out. He genuinely thought he was doing the world a favor. Everything that he did in favor of other people. He was always very selfless in that sense. Um, so I appreciate it because I do everything I can to honor my husband. And I don't lie to people, and I'm not going to ever say that the situation was perfect and things are out of here or out of there. We all have faults. But I truly respected Mitchell, and I always will. And I loved him dearly and always will. So I really appreciate everything that y'all do. And it makes me feel happy to get his story out there so that hopefully even if it's just one, if it's one veteran that it touches, one spouse that helps her understand, you know what I mean, what they may be going through or what she might be going through, or another veteran understanding what he's going through. If we could just say one, it makes it all worth it. And part of getting his name out there is that story to help other people not go down this road. What happened to Mitchell was absolutely unnecessary. It did not have to happen. And while I can't change that by any means, I want to help other people not get to that point. And no amount of me by any means can save anybody. But I hope that by doing podcasts and my platform and talking to people, I can help them save themselves.
One, and you're essentially doing that by agreeing to this conversation, and because I wholeheartedly believe that when people watch this, those ones that are going through similar struggles as you are, that maybe haven't talked about it, I think they're going to get some sense of hope that they're not alone in these struggles, and they'll listen to your words. And I think you're easily going to accomplish that goal, more than one, well more than one. So
I appreciate it.
so, but
If I
yeah,
accomplish anything, this entire world will never forget Mitchell's name. I promise you that. Or mine. They'll
well,
probably like his name more than mine, though.
well, we're heroes in the sky. Well, you have our commitment as well. We will continue to honor him, his legacy. We're right now in a nationwide kick. We're trying to get our battle vest in as many states as we possibly can. So the goal here in the next last half of this year and first half of next year is to get these warriors' names to states where they don't know who they are and they can learn about them, and
Right.
learn about the families, and because we want to honor you as well. And so we really thank you for your time today. It's been a outstanding conversation. The emotions, the truth that came out today, I commend you for, because a lot of people wouldn't have the guts to say some of this stuff. But that's what we need. We need this uncomfortable accountability, and we want to thank you for helping us.
Well, I appreciate you.